Hi, Carolyn. I was so busy talking.
All right, I think we're going to get kind of started. I think we'll kind of get started. We're going to have to, we'll keep it kind of low, and then we don't have a microphone, but that's fine. We're going to listen. So what we're going to do is first we'll have everybody introduce themselves. This year they're honoring the Reverend Rudolph Virkler family, and Rudolph came over with a bunch of sons, and we have a couple of those represented here, and so we'll have each one introduce themselves kind of and link back to how you're related to Rudolph.
Paul, the microphones over there don't reach here.
Oh,
That's your microphone system right there.
okay.
But I'm not sure they're going to reach.
That's fine. I think we'll be all right. Yeah, we'll just try to keep it low. Geneva, do you want to start first?
Okay, I'm Geneva Lehman Virkler, and my husband and I ran the Virkler farm on the Snell Road, original to John Virkler. And John was the third son of Rudolph Virkler. I have the original deed, which is on display in the house. And it went from John Virkler to Samuel Virkler to Elton's dad, L. Arthur Virkler, and then us. And then we sold the farm to David and Kim Gracie. There's a little story about it with our century plaque upstairs in the barn. I'm also related another way because my grandma Backman, her father was J.J. Virkler, who lived on the Riverside Farm, which is now owned by Rodney Dick, Joseph Joel Virkler, and he was the oldest son of Rudolph. And after Joseph and his wife moved to New Bremen to the Opportunities House, where Opportunities is now, then Victor and Laura Virkler took over that farm of B.S. Virkler and Son. And then it went to Eddie Virkler, and of course now owned by Rodney and Joanne Dicker. So I'm really related two ways.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So
I'm Ted Virkler Jr. My son is Paul here. He can explain it better than I can going down through.
So Dad comes under the Andrew Virkler, one of Rudolph's sons, Andrew, who had, his boy was Nathaniel S. They called him Neely, and Neely was his grandfather. So Neely was Ted Virkler Sr.'s father. And so we're under the Andrew Virkler.
I'm Jim Virkler. Michael Virkler was one of the first Virklers born in a French settlement. Rudolph's youngest son. Come over here with 7 sons in 1834. And Michael's born here. And his son Christian, his oldest, first son Christian, he started our farm on the River Road. And so he's a grandson from Rudolph. Rudolph's great-great-great-grandfather. And that's how that goes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So I provided them with some questions late in the game, in other words, last evening, so I've had a lot of time to think about it. That's based on my fault and on that, but so we wanted to start out, maybe we can talk about there, but I'd first asked them about a memory they had of maybe of their parents or of farming, so related to farming or agriculture, so if they had any memory along that they wanted to share. So can you go ahead and start this time, and then
I asked Elton any memories that he might have, and apparently his families didn't talk much about memories or whatever, but we were talking about Victor Virkler cutting ice in New Bremen on the pond, which he did, everybody knew that for a long time. And Elton said probably, I remember when I was about 10 years old, I call him Uncle Vic because he was my uncle on that side of the family. cut ice in New Bremen, and his dad would hook the horses on the sleigh. They would go to New Bremen and get the cut ice, draw it back to the farm on the sleigh, and put it in the ice house because it was used to cool their milk. And then they would get a block of ice out and put it in the water in the morning, or to cool their milk cans, until they got an electric cooler. And he said, we shared that with Uncle John K. Virkler, who lived on the Olmsted Road, because that was Elton's dad's brother, Elton's uncle. So they worked together on drawing the blocks of ice out of New Bremen. Elton was born in 1932, so that was in the early 40s.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Yep. Dad?
I also do remember just barely, I was born in 39, and we lived in New Bremen, on a little farm there on the corner of Arch Road and
Patty Street.
Patty Street. I never knew all them years that it was called Patty Street, but it was. And anyway, I can remember Eddie Virkler and them coming over with ice. There was a milk station right across the road from our farm, and Lava Beaver River Railroad would come along with a train and pick up the cream and milk for New York City with a tank car, of course. And then Borden's owned that milk station. And my dad had the farm across the road, but it was filled up, so he couldn't get in there. So he had to go way up to Boonville with his milk. He established the milk route and bought a truck, and he was heavily in debt, paying $8,000 for the farm. And anyway, I say Depression days, but he kept trucking along, and we didn't have good land there on our farm. I always said it cost just as much to drive a tractor over good land as it did poor land, but that's all my dad could afford. He couldn't even afford that, but we done the best we could. And so they worked hard, and anyway, then on my mother's side was Grandpa Farney. His name was James H. Farney, and he was a cattle dealer. And him and my dad went out buying some cows. They were $90 a piece, and milk was 72 cents a hundred. So you can imagine there was a family down the road by the name of West, and they was on welfare. And they used to come to our place at night and get a quart of milk. Well, the girls come, Helen and Gladys. They come, and then at the end of the month, my dad and mom would get a $3 check from the welfare, and they said they look forward to that $3 check. It don't sound like much today, but back then it was a lot of money for them. So Grandpa had a cattle truck, and I do remember he had it parked in the driveway at our place, and I'd sneak out there and he had the keys to it. It was a Ford, but I'd push the starter button, it'd go ooh ooh, and, of course, but it wouldn't start. Unbeknownst to Grandpa. And then I'd ride with him once in a while, and I think we picked up a cow or so somewhere. And he chewed tobacco. And I didn't have that problem, but Mom said when they was in the back seat of the old Model T, and Grandpa would be going down the road and he'd spit. Some of it would kind of land on the girls in the back seat. The wind was blowing. Well, that's what they encountered. And then I do remember Grandma making a good Thanksgiving meal for us one year. They lived up to Hamlin's Corners where they lived where Perry's Theory and Beth was. Perry's Theory and Beth tore down the old house and built a new one right there. And Grandma had every other dish on the table was a package of Beech Nut or Wrigley's chewing gum for us. And I thought, us kids thought, my goodness, we're really getting something here. You know, it was something. Because my uncle said he was born in 22 and he'd go to the store in New Bremen, the Albert Weaver store. And gum was a penny a stick. And there was three, four boys. They didn't have enough money to scrounge up enough to buy a package of gum. And Albert said, I will sell you 3 sticks of gum for 3 cents if you can find 3 cents, which they did. And so you can imagine how it was back in them days. And that's just the way it was.
Well, maybe we'll let Jim do a little bit about farming or logging.
Yeah, I'm done with my story on that. Yeah.
I haven't got too much stories to tell. One story I'll pass on, my father told, his grandfather was Christian. They had an old milk house with, of course, station cans and can cooler. And he thought some milk was missing a little bit out of some of the cans a little bit. So he hid out there in the shadows one night, and there some kids come, and they had their cups, and they was drinking some milk, and they said, "Thank you, Mr. Virkler," and he said, "You're welcome." They didn't know he was right there. That must have been kind of surprised to them. And another thing I want to share is I brought that great-great-grandfather Michael Virkler. He's Rudolph's son that was born over here. This is his marking axe. When they logged it, they had a stamping axe. You stamp on the end of the log, and that MV for Mike Virkler. That's how you identified the logs when you went to the sawmill or the log drives or whatever. So he was born in 1835, so this is quite old. I don't know if you can see the dent in there. I mean, they just swung it and hit the end of the logs, and that's how they identified whose logs was who. Kind of a simple way of marking things.
Tattoo, like?
Yep, just, yep. That's about it. No, nobody uses it no more. It's just been hanging around, it's survived the test of time, I guess.
They didn't heat it up, they just.
Nope, they just pounded on a fresh log, and that make the MV in there. No matter which way they hit it, is made both ways, and then when the logs got to wherever they got to go, they knew whose was. I suppose other families had their initials on stuff, so it's kind of a unique way of marking stuff, simple way, but that's what they had to work with.
Did he heat that and brand his cattle?
I don't know about that.
Have them or kill them.
Knock 'em over.
Pretty substantial act, right?
Yeah, it's quite a head thing. I mean, I don't know how they forged that way back in them days. They must have had their ways to it. It goes back to the 1800s.
You wonder if when they drew the logs out and put them in the river, they marked them in the spring, then when they went, they went together. Neat.
Then about the ice cutting, my father used to cut ice with a young guy, and he told some story, teenager. They cut ice in Dadville and Blackville, twice in the same spot. They used to of course load the team up, sleigh. When the team got the bottom of Limekiln Hill, they had another team there. They double hitched up the hill, and then they unhooked, and that team all did all day long was go back and forth, hooking up the hill, and then they went to the storage house in Lavelle. A lot of that ice went in the trains to New York City and wherever it went. There was a lot of ice cutting done. That was a big chore back then, and some, all winter long, they cut ice.
How about the quarter? What we got there?
Yeah, and he told a story because my grandfather Sid, they hired farmers to haul the ice, they're the ones that had the teams and
Okay,
stuff, but
yeah.
to encourage them to get them there in the morning quicker, the first guy got a quarter extra for
Is that
for
right?
getting there.
Yeah.
That kind of incentive to get there going, you know.
Get your team up, get milking done and
Yep,
get there.
get milking done and get
Okay.
hauling. They got ice early, but then, you know, the farmers took a while to get their chores done to
Yeah.
get there, so.
Yeah.
How big were the blocks of ice?
Depends on the thickness of the ice, but I think, I don't know, they kind of cut them in
It was big cake.
big cakes,
Big,
quite heavy,
heavy.
ice tongs.
No hydraulic.
Our dad used to cut ice, it was 22 inches by 22 inches by 30.
Okay.
My dad was called, he had an ice in a pond,
Yeah.
My husband, he wrote all about it. And he did my brother Ken. And I think he got sent to Jackson. Anyway, it's written up.
Oh, wonderful, Great, very good.
I'm not sure, you know how they work,
He had,
It's called the ice plow, to store the ice,
so he had some kind of rig, one cylinder engine, and a 40 to 45 diameter saw blade. And they would run that motor, push it in the ice. It cut about 15 inches, and then they used the ice spade to jam in and break it loose. But they would cut a grid.
Grid, yeah, right, yeah.
Then they had like a bale elevator stuck down in the water that lifted chunks of ice out of the water.
I'm not sure how these ice plows work. I don't know how to store it. I mean, it's quite a thing. It's got teeth down, it's got a marking, but you got your line down, make it square, and follow the line. The horse is actually drew it.
They would have to have something pretty strong.
My father said once in a while, go through the ice, have to agree. They get them out.
You had to go in front of the horse, and you had a bag or something to put over the mouth, and make them puff up, blow up, and if you was lucky, they popped out of that hole. If you was lucky, sometimes you weren't lucky, and there was fish meat.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, you had another thought on the ice?
Well, when you talked about them cutting ice on the Black River, yes, they did. And Jane Hills told me that her dad, John Matulowicz, her grandfather, the Bushes, that they would sometimes have the Virkler horses in their barn, because they're just on the other side of the river. They keep them there overnight.
And there's a lot of different kinds of ice. You said like snow ice, it depends on how the weather comes. I mean, the best ice is made like in February when it's real cold. So the second cutting of ice is usually better than the first, because the clear water again, sometimes you don't get much snow in February either. So snow ice isn't as good. Good clear ice is the best ice. Sometimes it's different layers of ice, different qualities of ice.
And he sold those blocks of ice, if they came to pick it up, at the time they were cutting, it was like 5 cents a block. 5 cents a block. If they delivered it to town in the summer, it was 25 cents a block into their refrigerator, their ice box.
Somebody told me the other day, we were talking about sugaring in there, and they said, the old guys told them that the ice was the first crop of the year. And that, how the ice came, how the ice there could set the rest of the crops for the year. Meant to be the weather, you know, the weather.
4 ice years.
Yep.
The rest of the syrup was in there.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Okay, that's okay.
Good thing we've got refrigeration because last winter.
Right. My father said back in the day, it's a mild winter, they'd have to go away, I mean, from ponds, woods, to get
Get enough ice.
Get enough ice. They had some mild winters, like last year, they had frozen ice in the golf. Couldn't cut ice off.
And her father had a nice house. And they would pack the ice in there, they put 10 to 12 inches of sawdust on the outside, but nothing between the layers. Because when they laid brought them in, it was so cold that the blocks wouldn't freeze together.
We had on here, thinking about your favorite meal with your mother or your grandmother that they cooked. Dad shared one. Any of the others on that? Anything, any more on meals or anything like that?
I didn't get Mom's smoked ham at Thanksgiving time and her milk gravy. I missed that milk gravy. It's, I don't think it's too hard to make, but I can still taste it. Yeah.
What'd you have it on? What would you use it anything?
On potatoes, on
Okay.
mashed potatoes, or on Johnny cake or whatever you wanted it.
Yeah.
Mom made it be on mashed potatoes mostly.
Right.
Milk gravy. Yeah. Lot of milk available and, you know.
Yeah.
I know my father said, you know, back. Sauerkraut was big thing. Big crack down stuff, get your sauerkraut, all the one. Hold it off, the crust off.
Peel a little sauerkraut off and eat it. Yeah, eat it. Yeah.
You ain't lost salt.
Yeah. Dad, what did you have for breakfast most mornings?
Johnny, except Sunday morning. That Johnny cake, I never got sick of it. I still like it. I usually had the, we didn't have a ourselves, so we had to have Carol. I like the Carol. And then my brother, he would have some tuna fish on his yak, and then a little bit of horseradish yak on his Johnny cake.
About Johnny cake, my father, same way, they had it 6 days a week, every day but Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
And when he got married in 1952, he told my mother, he said, you don't have to make Johnny cake every day for me. That was it. A lot of families, they had it 6 days a week.
I just love it, yeah.
It was a cheap food, cornmeal.
My wife will say, I just don't know what to have for supper or dinner or something. I'll say, have Johnny cake. That'll be all right for me.
They ate potatoes 3 times a day.
Potatoes too.
Yeah, fries for breakfast.
So why didn't you eat it on Sunday?
Well, that's what I want to
Because
know.
we went to church, didn't take the time to
Give the cook a day off.
Mom didn't give the cook, yeah, right. The cook had a day off, like, not for supper, but for,
There was no time for it?
wasn't time, no, not really.
What'd you eat on Sunday?
Oatmeal, probably.
Probably oatmeal.
Just oatmeal here and then
Yeah,
at church.
oatmeal, I
Bigger
guess.
meal at church.
Yeah,
Cream of wheat,
Okay.
every now cream of wheat.
Yep.
Needed it.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, we talked a little about there, what about games, or what type of games did you play as kids?
Well, we, of course, the old standby outdoors was hide and go seek. And then we played a lot of Monopoly and Rook, Old Maid. And there was another one I had here. Read it here. Maybe bingo. I didn't have that down, but I think we played some bingo. I never cared much for the marble games myself, like Chinese checkers and things. But the rest of them liked it kind of, but I just didn't. But anyway, that's what we, you know, lot of Monopoly in that. Yeah.
Others? Anything there?
Yeah.
Jim, anything on that, on the games or anything?
And
Okay.
popcorn with it, of course. Yep.
How about school? Thoughts about attending school, or?
Yeah, I went where Elton went to New Bremen, And I had Miss Schultz. She was an old maid. And she was a good teacher. Only her pupil here wasn't too good at behaving. But anyway, that wasn't her fault. One time my brother, the ball went up on the roof right around noontime. And Natty, they had to get a ladder to get it off the roof. Well, they found a ladder all right, that went good, but then they took the ladder away from Natty and the bell is ringing for time to go back to school, and Miss Schultz said, "Where's Natty?" "Oh, he's up on the roof without a ladder." Scared to jump down, of course. So nobody would volunteer to go out and do it. So Miss Schultz had to hoist the ladder up herself and get him down, get going again. Stunts like that, and different things happen.
How did Miss Schultz discipline the children?
Well, she had a rubber hose, about not too big around, but, and you went in a little side room there and you got pounded on the head and arms, and it didn't really hurt, but her face would get awful red. Not all she could handle, and she'd hope that that would do some good.
Did it do any good?
Yeah, yes and no. Now, I knew a teacher over Lava, and my cousin, his punishment was go in the corner and stand on your tiptoes and put your chin up against something in there in the corner. That probably done more good than a pounding, but every teacher had their own method.
Well, this has nothing to do with the perfect thing, but an old guy, well, he's dead now, told me when he went to Sperryville, just a one-room schoolhouse, and his discipline, when it was bad, the teacher sprinkled cracked corn in the corner, and you kneeled on it with your knees. That's one punishment they had then, if they'd never heard that before.
Elton wasn't any angel either when he went to the States.
I didn't dare to say it.
But I heard some stories from him and the Virkler girls that he told about, because they would dare him to do things and he would do it. And one of the things he did was they would dare him to go out and stand by the road and see how long you'd stand there before a car would come. And he would wait, until the last second and run in. But one thing he did, he walked from our farm to the Bremen, and his dad did too. And he said he would walk home on very cold, icy days. And he would walk home backwards. So it wouldn't go in his face to walk all that distance.
Cold up there. My sister said one day Elton was sitting in the seat there, and all of a sudden he was laying right on the floor. He just collapsed right out of his seat, and the teacher, talked about scared, she ran over there and she said, Elton, are you all right? Of course, it was a fake. Elton started to act like he's coming around on the floor there, like, what happened, he said. He finally get up and get back in the seat, get going again. Things like that happen.
How about getting together with the neighbors?
Well, the neighbors more or less got together with us. We had some neighbors that seemed to be, about every night they'd wander over to our place, and of course, knowing Mom was good-hearted, she'd always have something for them to eat, and popcorn or something, have a treat for them, and about 9 o'clock, they'd go, about every night, and just the way it was. We went a little bit to the neighbors, but it seemed to me we took time to do it. It'd probably be going over to Uncle Edry's over to the store, but when he lived across the road where his mother lived. It wasn't when he was at the store. But Dad and them would go over to the store at night, and this one thing I almost forgot, this was pretty good. Uncle Edry had the store there, so they stayed open till 9, probably 9 o'clock at night at least, 10 o'clock. And these farmers would come in there and sit on the stools around the store and talk about their weather and whatever they talked about, farmers talked about. But right behind it, where they were sitting, was a cigar, boxes of cigars and stuff was displayed there. And Uncle Esri was doing up his business at night. He said, I'm a penny or two short here on my cigars, he said. I said, I wonder what's going on. And so he starts to look a little bit, here's this, what do you know, here's this one farmer. He's about trying to go home. Oh, man! My arm hurts, I can't put it back in my head, but man, about time to go home, I guess. He's reaching back there for a cigar with his hand. Stuffs it in his pocket. So the next night, Uncle Essy's ready for him. And just as he gets it in his pocket, Uncle Esry said, want some help smoking that yet? Yes, he had. I don't know if he made him pay for it or not. But that was the end of the time to do it. That thing's happened back there too. Store, but I'm not going to mention what he was. That's what he told him when he was at the store. I was told not to say that. Dad never go over to the store at night.
Any other neighbor
One thing I
gathered?
almost forgot, this was pretty good. Edry had the store there, so they stayed open until 9, probably 9 o'clock at night at least.
People stop by and
These farmers
visit?
would come in there.
Like obviously those ones.
Yeah, people seem to take the time to visit years ago. Weather and whatever they talked about, farmers talked about. I mean, it was busy, but behind them, where they were sitting, was
Sunday nights or?
yeah, Sunday nights or Saturday night maybe or so, yeah. Yeah,
Okay. How about, go ahead.
yeah.
How about weddings?
I,
Did anybody attend a wedding or remember a wedding or?
I went, attended my sister Rita's wedding and Arlene's and Regina's. Then I was in the army. I didn't go to Norman's, and like that. But just a regular wedding, Yeah. Got married. Got married. I know. I specifically remember going to Arlene's after the wedding. Dad had a lot of hay out. And this neighbor that run our doorstep off, he was supposed to help us hay it that day, 4th of July. But somehow or other he forgot to come and help us. And we had all that hay out to put in. Dad wasn't too happy with him. He kind of said, well, that's a heck of a note, he said. I thought you was going to come and help us hay after the wedding. Oh, he said, we took a ride, he said. Dad said, well, that don't help me get my hay in. That's the way it was, We done the best we could. Yeah.
Well, we'll get there. Did you have other
No,
questions
you
that
were
you wanted?
talking about church,
Church, yeah.
and Elton just said, I remember going to church in the 37 Dodge. I
Okay.
never know what a 37 Dodge looked like, but I do remember, the horse sheds around the churches, and I'm not sure how many here remember them anymore.
I
but-
do.
You do, Teddy,
They-
yes.
They took them down in 47.
Is that when they did? Okay, I
Right.
remember them specifically around the church in Naumburg, the Apostolic Church, because that's where my grandma Backman went. And interesting to me was Grandma and Grandpa Backman were baptized on December 25th outside at that church.
In the river.
In a van or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, look at
Isn't
that.
that something?
Because that was their anniversary.
Oh,
They were married in yes. Yes.
So baptized
It was
together.
December 25th.
Baptized together on that day.
Yes.
yeah.
I hope they won the water.
I never thought, sometimes you just don't remember and think about asking and getting all the
I know.
stories that you can.
I do know that when my dad was born 1905, and the babysitter was Barbara Backman, your grandmother. She was come to help Grandma Virkler do house chores and things. They hired her, you know, because they needed help. And Aunt Grace and them by that time was out working to Lowville somewhere, making beds in a hotel or something over there, doing that kind of work, you know. So somebody had to help Grandma, and Barb Backman was hired to do it in 1905.
They were married in 1902.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for some reason she was there to help, or come there or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Other thoughts or stories on church, anything else on? Dad, any stories of vehicles and horse sheds and?
Well, there was seemingly a couple guys at church that this man and woman had their car parked in the sheds. And they went and turned his front wheels just as short as they could. He had an old 4950 Ford, and of course, them older men would sit there and give it the gas, kind of slip the clutch a little, and then kind of let her out. They did all right. Crunch! They, well, his wife was yelling and hollering at him, 'cause he banged the front fender in, but poor man, he didn't know that the front wheels was turned, you know. It was too late then. One of them stunts that happened at church. Then there was one more. These same guys, they used to have, we always had a meal at church at noon. Usually it was bread and butter as a rule. And the people that was gonna serve it, they got the tables all set, and then they went up in church to listen to the service. Then probably 15, 20 minutes before church was let out, you'd come down and make sure that everything was in order and get your coffee around there and like that. Well, they come down and there was the butter all, they had turned the heat up right on high. Down, there was heat for the upstairs and heat for the down. Turned it right up to just as high as it would go. So obviously all the butter was melted in the dish there. So they couldn't spread their butter, they almost had kittens, so to speak. Poor woman, she's almost crying, because, well, wouldn't you? You know, woman likes to have a nice presentable meal, you know, and there your butter's melted.
What year was that?
I
What
say
year
the
was
best you could do was pour the butter on the bread, I guess they done. What else was they gonna do?
Ted, what year was that?
All about the 40s.
In the board.
In the 40s, yeah. You know them quite well. They were known to pull a lot of tricks. So, I'll say no more about that.
Oh.
Yeah, you wanted, this was that picture you were talking about?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or do you want, Lynette, you please, why don't you?
Okay, I don't know, probably different ones might have this particular photo. Ember, Mora and stuff. This was at Embert's farm, right, Ashley?
Yeah.
And,
The ice house isn't there anymore.
what,
The ice house isn't there anymore.
oh, okay. But this is, I'll list the names and then I'll pass the picture. It was pretty interesting.
Have you got the date on it?
There's no date.
No,
I think, when I blew up the license plate, it was like, 1911 or something like that.
it was pretty interesting. So this was well, actually it was the William F. Virkler farm.
You want me to hold it up while you say it?
Okay. And then your father bought that from the Virklers?
Grandfather bought it in 1920.
Okay,
And
so it was a Virkler farm. William F. Virkler.
Where was it?
It's on the second road. It's across from Norbert and Joanne Farney's home, that farm.
Okay.
And, so anyways, there's a lineup of all these vehicles. The vehicles are air-cooled Franklin cars with wooden frames, and they were made in Syracuse, these vehicles. So the names that I have was Leon Virkler, Peter Virkler, Will Virkler, Sidney Virkler, Sylvester Virkler, John Virkler, Michael Virkler, and Christian Virkler.
What's the name of them? Franklin?
Franklin.
Franklin.
Seth Schultz had a Franklin.
So,
Later
I don't know, I'll,
If you want to send it, or I can,
yeah.
And then there's another person on the end, he was a salesman for us.
oh, yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, you, Ashley, tell what you know about
I
it.
got the name of the home on that, but I didn't have all the
Sylvester?
Yes, it's Sylvester.
You know, one.
But now how, like, when you're,
And one of
Was
them
that
was a
Uncle
driver
Will?
to Berkeley that owned it or something, you know, I mean.
yeah, it's weird.
I got information from Carpenter.
Okay,
Okay.
He told me what he was.
Geneva.
Wrote it down.
Hello, Geneva. Was that Uncle
I
Will?
can't imagine back
Was
then
that
what
Uncle
all of
Will?
them.
No,
Oh, okay.
farther back.
That-
John,
I think it was.
John Virkler that she's talking about, his picture's here, he had a feed mill in Croghan. He was a brother to Sylvester Virkler, and they had a feed mill in Casterland too. And then they closed, Charmaine will know, the water, isn't that where the water wheel is, they're trying to get out or something by the Croghan Island Mill? The original Virkler farm. So this was, yeah, this is the John Virkler, and the Sylvester Virkler.
yeah,
They were
they bought calves and stuff too.
Sylvester Virkler did,
Yeah, they
in
did.
Casterland.
Yeah,
Sold coal and that, and bought calves and shipped them to New York City.
right.
His, Priscilla, what's that's in the house from Sylvester Virkler? His account book. His ledger. His great big thick ledger has been donated here, and that's in the house.
Wonderful.
From Sylvester Virkler.
The feed mill in Croghan, isn't that where Vinnie's is now?
Mike.
Is that-
Not, I think the John Virkler feed mill was down by the Croghan Island Mill on the back of Lehman and Zare. Am I
Oh,
right,
okay.
Charmaine?
Yeah, okay.
Could be.
It's not there
Yep.
anymore.
All right.
But Peter Virkler is Solomon Virkler's brother.
Yes.
Oh, okay, back in that generation, yeah, okay. So it's sons of Rudolph.
So this is the ones that I came across.
Oh, yeah, we got,
Okay,
okay,
have them,
can we have it?
yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. I know you do. Love
There
it.
you are, good for you.
Good.
This was the, see, this says Castellan and Croghan.
Yeah, okay, they're both mills. Yeah. Good. And that, did you have others you wanted to share with that? Lynette, other thoughts?
Well, was you gonna be talking about the Virkler Century Farm?
We had one, and then you had
Not mine, not our farm. Howard.
No, but you
Howard.
want, yeah, please, if you
Howard.
want
Their
it.
family.
Yeah,
Their
yeah.
Right.
family.
Right. Well, Uncle Howard and Aunt Pernell had bought Uncle Leon's farm. But I'm not for sure who was ahead of Uncle Leon.
Sydney.
He had that farm? But then he, not your Sydney.
No, there's another, there's two Sydney.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
That's what
okay.
gets confusing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
He didn't have no sons, so a nephew, Uncle Lean was a nephew.
Okay.
And Uncle Lean didn't have no son, so Uncle Howard was a nephew. So it went from, they didn't go to sons, it went to nephews.
so who would have been before Sydney? You know, could he be the original?
No, Michael.
Mike,
Mike the last,
Was on that farm?
Yeah.
Rudolph, Mike.
Nicole,
Oh, on that specific
Yeah.
farm? I guess I never knew that.
yeah.
Wow,
The
okay.
youngest son took over.
Where was that farm?
Where the walls were in the Black Creek Road.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's the
Where
original,
they're doing
That's
the,
the original,
Rudolph.
original farm.
original 1834, that's where Rudolph
Right.
come there.
somebody's rebuilding.
Where the harvester silo is.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing something
Doing
with barn
something,
up there.
Rebuild, yeah, yeah,
They're
well,
gonna, Mrs. Wadman's daughter,
Michelle?
she's gonna put a banquet hall or something in there. When, I don't know. They're working on it.
The farm on the Black Creek Road was Solomon Berkeley's farm.
It was?
Yeah.
Where,
They only.
Neversaw.
Right down the curve.
Neversaw.
Yebersol,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
See,
Joseph Virkler, then Solomon, his son.
he had 7 sons that had farms, and they're all within 4 miles of the home farm.
Yeah.
You know where Gilwood is, and that was a.
Tell who
Yeah.
they are, Jim. Tell
No, I
who.
don't know.
Yes, you do.
Charmaine gave me the list.
You got,
Okay, Charmaine then. Charmaine.
I don't know if I know it off the top of my head, but, yeah.
The list from Charmaine, yeah, you can read it,
Yes,
right?
Charmaine.
that's, that,
You have that, I don't have it in my head right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so Reverend Joseph Virkler would have been Rudolph's son, oldest son, had the Joe Walsman farm, Black Creek Road, as we just talked about, right? And then Christian Virkler, oh, no, you're not Christian. Christian and Catherine Yancey had Kyle Woodrick's farm, right in the center. Then John Virkler and Barbara Gerber had Dave Gracie's farm, that's over there, yep, yours. Andrew Virkler and Magdalena Farney, that's Dad's generation, had Elmer and Nevin Moser's farm up there on 812, right?
The
That
end
was
of the Mattis Road.
end of the Manus Road, that was that farm.
Yep.
Nicholas Virkler was another son, but he died young. Then Reverend Jacob Virkler and Catherine Zaire had Gilbert Woodrick's or Mike Wine's farm. And then Reverend Peter Virkler and Anna Farney had Rod and Carolyn. That was the one in Croghan. And then Michael Virkler and Mary took over the homestead, the Virkler homestead.
And then Dad's uncle Sam was over on Norbert's farm. Minnie and Martha and Lavina.
It's the next generation down,
Next
yep.
generation,
Yep, yep,
Yep.
yeah.
Norbert, Norbert Steiner's farm or?
Yep.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Been his mother.
So do it, like you know, remember that they used to do century farms, if a farm had been in the same family 100 years?
Yeah, yeah.
Then they were given an award. So Uncle Howard and Aunt Pearl, I'll read it, Governor Rockefeller, right, in the picture, shakes hands with Mrs. Howard Virkler of Croghan, Lewis County, at the annual dinner Wednesday night of the State Agricultural Society in Albany. Mrs. Virkler and husband, second from right, were among 4 families the governor cited. There was 4 families there, I don't know who else, for long-time operation of farms. At left are Mrs. Rockefeller and George Humphreys of New Hartford, and the Humphreys presented the Virklers to Mr. Rockefeller to receive the award.
What year was that?
Yeah.
60.
Yeah, 1960.
Okay.
Yeah.
Must have been 1990s.
So the citation goes to farmers whose farm have been operated by their family for at least 100 years. The Virkler Farm citation, signed by the governor, said the Virkler Farm of nearly 400 acres is situated in Lewis County near Croghan. Its present owners are Mr. and Mrs. Howard Virkler, Howard's great-great-grandfather Rudolph, a Mennonite preacher in France, and his wife immigrated to America in 1834. The Virkers proceeded to French settlement, acquired land, and built a log cabin at a spot midway between the present Virkler homestead and Black Creek. Farms were few in that part of New York State, and the Reverend Rudolph Virkler frequently entertained his grandchildren by telling them how friendly Indians came to his cabin at nightfall and slept before his fire. The labors of the pioneers were rewarded the very first year when they harvested an abundance of flax to be woven into table and bed linens and combined with wool for outer garments. The Virkler family grew and prospered as sons of the Reverend and Mrs. Rudolph Virkler grew to manhood and married. They cleared farmlands of their own, all within a 4-mile radius of their homestead. As the family took root, another very fine house was erected. It is the present home of Mr. and Mrs. Howard Virkler. 5 faithful generations of Virklers have added to the dignity and standing of the profession of farming. Mr. and Mrs. Howard Virkler and their family of 3 children are staunch attendants at the Evangelical Baptist Church at New Bremen. It is with pride that I nominate the Virklers as members of the Order of Century Farms of New York.
Wonderful.
But I feel bad because actually Jim and Steve and Chris, their farm met that standard.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, that's quite something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, we're kind of wrapping up. We're thinking about, we're on a Saturday here, so tell us in the old days what Saturday evening, afternoon and evening looked like.
Well, a lot of people probably took their bath in an old tub around the stove on Saturday night, but I didn't. Sunday morning, Dad would go upstairs. We had a bathroom upstairs and downstairs, indoor plumbing, and I would take my bath, and Dad would be shaving. This is Sunday morning, and I would get a lecture on, well, maybe who my future wife should be or shouldn't be. And as stubborn as I was, a lot of German in me, and thankfully I did listen to my dad, but he probably thought I wasn't listening. And so that's the way it went. That was every Sunday morning. Was a sermon from my dad. Please don't or please do, and whatever.
Did other of the siblings take their baths on Saturday night? Did your
They must,
sisters
I guess they did. Well, the girls, being they went in the barn, they took their baths quite often anyway, more than the boys did.
Okay.
I never remembered of my mother getting in the bathtub, or she took a sponge bath, I think, downstairs, I guess. I don't know. Dad never smelled like the barn did, you know, like, but must have took, washed up, but I don't remember that part.
Oh dear. Well, you went in the barn too, so you smell just like he did. How would
Right.
you know the difference?
You gotta remember, my dad, when he was 16 or 17, if I can take the time to do that yet, when he was on the home farm, he was born in 1905, in April 7th. And when he was about 16 or 17, he was in the sugar shanty that day. He didn't feel good. Now they had a sugar bush up on Beach Hill what they call the big woods. My grandpa did. And they often they hired somebody to go up there and sugar it. They sugared it around the farmyard and like that for their syrup. So anyway, they had a black pan cooking in there in the sugar shanty. My dad was laying on the cot in there, he didn't feel good. When he heard the horses come in, the whipple trees hit the side of the shanty, it woke him up. He is supposed to be watching this big kettle. It was running in the faucet, so it wouldn't run over. And when he woke up, it was all cloudy in there. And instead of going around and shutting that, it was almost ready to boil over. You're supposed to shut the faucet off, but he reached across to shut that faucet off, and he missed the faucet. He should have went around, but he didn't. And he went right into that hot sack. He burned over half of his body, first, second, and third degree burns. Well, obviously, he come right back out of there, and he ran right through the screen door, and his brother was just coming, Emery, older brother. Excuse me. And he grabbed a hold of his wool coat, and it was so hot that sap keeps right on a cooking, and he had to let go. He couldn't. It was so hot. And when he grabbed him the second time, the skin and all come. And Dad ran around the house. He couldn't get his breath. The pores were all shut, see? And he finally, every morning, it would be Dr. Jones from Beaver Falls and Dr. Drummond, doctor from, long name there from Croghan, would come and dress and burns. And his mother, and he'd holler so that his mother would go out behind the barn so she wouldn't hear him screaming. And they come, I don't know how many mornings, and he never went. They didn't have burn centers. The doctor said, you may be just the right age to stand it either way, which he must have been. And so his shoulders and everything was all scars. And he didn't never go into hot water. Like that's probably why he didn't take a shower. We didn't have a shower. I mean a bath. I'm just surmising that. But anyway, he did live, and in the summertime he was raking down on the flats, and he had them bandages on his arms. Of course they'd itch, because it was healing. He gave them bandages a throw. I don't think his mother knew it, but he healed up. He healed up, went on. Yeah. So, yep.
So how many baths did you take a week?
I have no idea.
How many baths did you take a week?
A what?
How many baths did you take per week?
I say I took just on Sunday morning. Otherwise, when I got ready for school, if I took a sponge bath, you know, like most farm kids. Hit the high spots and there were some kids in school that stunk like the barn.
One thing I remember about Grandpa Virkler that my mom always told me he had scars all over one side of his whole body, but we as kids never ever saw those scars because he always wore a long sleeve shirt.
Yeah, he always wore a long
And
sleeve
he
shirt.
planned, well, yeah, and
Yeah.
so he never wore, even when it was really
No.
hot, he would wear a short sleeve shirt or a long sleeve.
Then in 1926, he was working in Croghan. I can't think what's there right now. Mennonite's plumbing is right there now. But there was a garage there, Duffel's garage. They sold Ford cars. Dad worked for them, and he was underneath the car taking a spring out. Of course, no safety glasses back then. And he got a piece of steel in his eye. So he had to go, went to the doctors to Lava, And they said, we can't get that piece of steel out of there. We gotta go to Syracuse. So he went to Syracuse all by himself on the train to see what they could do about it. Well, they didn't have a strong enough magnet at that time to pull that piece of steel out. They had to surgically remove it, and so he left him blind in one eye, like that, the rest of his life.
Completely blind?
Pardon?
Completely blind in one eye?
He could just tell daylight and darkness, that was it. He always just had window glass for his glasses on that side. Plus he always shot a gun from that side, he had to learn to shoot